Midtown studios of Bloomberg Television in New York City, this is Charlie Rose.
The O.J. Simpson trial riveted the nation and divided it along racial lines in many cases. At the center of the controversy stood defense attorney Johnnie Cochran. The trial lawyer and former prosecutor has made a career out of attacking police misconduct and defending and suing people on that issue. No stranger to the spotlight, his high-profile clients include Michael Jackson and Jim Brown. Journey to Justice is his rise to the helm of Simpson's so-called dream team and the climb that preceded it. And I'm very pleased to have him on this broadcast. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
Great to have you here. Shreveport, Charity Hospital. How many years ago? About 50 years ago?
Well, a little more than that, maybe 59 years ago.
59?
59 years ago, yes.
Your dad was Johnnie Cochran Sr.
That's right.
He lives with you now in Los Angeles. He's seeing this sort of evolution.
He does, and he's a great inspiration to me.
Tell me about growing up in Louisiana before you moved to Los Angeles.
I have the greatest memories of it. A family, so much love. I knew nothing about segregation, knew nothing about prejudice or any kind of racial dilemmas or whatever. Just a time of love and family, eating together. You just could be whatever you wanted to be. And I remember early on my parents stressing education, the need for education being the key. It was just great. I remember the Sundays, we sat down, we ate together, we walked, to church every Sunday. It was a great, great time.
How many brothers and sisters? I
had at that time 2 sisters. I have 2 sisters and 1 brother.
Yeah. And where are they?
They're all in Los Angeles. We all stayed very close.
You all come when the family moved to L.A., all stayed there?
Yeah, we all stayed there, and we've always done that.
Your mother was Hattie?
Hattie Cochran,
Is
yes.
she deceased?
Just died in October of 1991, almost 5 years now.
Yeah. So she saw Johnnie become the lawyer that he wanted to be?
Well, yes, she did, and I feel she's still very much with me now. I mean, on all the days, I think about her.
Religion is important? I mean, is part of you deep inside?
Very much a part of me. It guides everything I do. I believe very strongly that in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy paths.
You moved to L.A., and your dad by then, what, was in insurance?
Yes, he was with the Golden State Mutual Life Insurance Company, yes.
You went to L.A. High?
I did. I loved it. It was a great school, great school.
Dustin Hoffman, a friend?
One of my classmates, yes. It was an exciting time for me.
When did you say lawyer? Being in the legal system, prosecutor, defense attorney, judge?
Well, I actually started the thought in junior high school. Remember a conversation with my parents. My mother wanted me to be a doctor. My father said, well, if he wants to be a lawyer, let him be that. But she said, then promise me you'll be the best that you can be. From that moment on, I knew that's what I wanted to do, and I've kept that dream alive, actually. And so by the time I got to high school, it was great because I was in a great area where I could compete with kids, and from that point on, it's been what I wanted to do.
If you're a young black man growing up in Los Angeles or growing up anywhere in America in the 50s, people like Thurgood Marshall,
yes,
giants. I mean, nobody stood taller than Thurgood Marshall when he argued Brown versus Board of Education.
Absolutely. He became my absolute legal mentor. I mean, what he did in Brown versus the Board of Education was remarkable. And I thought, gee, I could do this and try to change society and change it for the better. I thought it was remarkable.
Yeah. After you went to law school, where?
In Los Angeles, Loyola Law School in Los Angeles. Yeah.
There's a story that you wanted to go to Harvard. Dad said, I got some other kids to educate beside you.
He did, and my sisters especially at that time, and yes. And so I understood. I had that dream. But I went on and went to UCLA undergrad and went on to Loyola Law School.
City attorney?
Yes, a young prosecutor, started off the first 2.5 years. It was exciting.
Yeah. And then went out in private practice?
Yeah, went to private practice after about 2.5 years there in the city attorney's office. And I was in private practice for almost 11 years.
Where did this sense of involvement with police misconduct, which had shaped your life, become central?
It really stemmed from the time in the city attorney's office. In California, Charlie, we have something called 148 of the Penal Code, which is a charge that's resisting, interfering, delaying, obstructing an officer in the performance of his duty. As a young prosecutor, I'd see these defendants come in, and many times they still showed the effects of injuries they'd suffered. And invariably, they were charged with the offense involving the officer. The officer seemed no problem, no worse for the wear.
No bruises.
So, no bruises at all. But yet we were prosecuting these guys for misdemeanor charges. And after a period of time, it became very emotional for everyone. Most of these people were African Americans. Many times the police officers were white. So over a period of time, it came to me to seem that, gee, we're doing this to keep these defendants from suing the city of Los Angeles. It seems I was part of a conspiracy there, and the reports all said the same. This person was resisting and interfering. And we had a saying that these are gentlemen or people who had flunked the attitude test, because, you know, mere words can be resisting and interfering.
Cop pulls them over, their attitude is not just right, something
It
happens.
escalates, and they end up getting assaulted.
Why do you think that happens?
I think it has to do with race and racism. You know, whether we like it or not, racism has played a part in our lives in this country. Now, yeah, I love this country. It's the greatest country in the world. But it doesn't help to pretend that we don't have some problems. They've gotten better, but we have to keep working at it. And I saw that pretty clearly. And I thought it was an issue of race. I really did.
And it comes from just the life that the community that people are living in? It comes from wherever racism flows out of?
Oh, I think so. It has a lot to do with the history of the Los Angeles Police Department. We talk about that in Journey to Justice. Many of these police officers were recruited by Chief Parker, a very strong chief.
William Parker.
William Parker, a legend in his time. He really was.
Jack Webb made him
very famous. He went to the southern states to recruit tough people from the South who came there. And they were almost like an occupying force. We didn't have community-based police. These police officers lived, many of them, outside the city of L.A. They would come in and, you know, patrol and supposedly protect and serve in areas they never lived in. It made a difference. They didn't know these people. They came with all the biases and stereotypical thinking. And it was a real problem. And, you know, what I saw starting there as a young prosecutor in '63 till about '65, of course, culminated in August of 1965. What was known then as the Watts riots. I mean, you could really see it coming. There were so many of these cases. The trigger was always a police officer stops a citizen and always escalates. And that was the problem.
But Los Angeles has also had a very popular black mayor who had been a policeman.
He really was. But think about it. Tom Bradley was wonderful. He meant so much to our city. You see the skyline today, and he's one of my mentors also. But he was a police officer. It was so bad and so tough on him. As bright as he was, he could only go to the rank of lieutenant. So what did he do? He left the department, become a lawyer. He ran for the city council and ultimately became mayor. So he was over the chief. But the chief was very strong. Parker was gone by now. But Parker's driver, after a succession of chiefs, Redden, Davis, and some others, was now Darrell Gates, who had learned at the foot of Bill Parker. Yes.
Yeah. Geronimo Pratt.
Yes.
What did that mean to you?
That case taught me a lot of things, Charlie. It taught me, among other things, to never accept the official version at face value. This is an innocent man, convicted of a murder that he didn't commit. He's a man who is a victim of the FBI's counterintelligence program. As a naive young lawyer in 1972, I'd won like 10 murder cases in a row. I didn't think that I was going to lose. I thought this was another case. The prosecutor on the other side was in my law school class at Loyola. I thought I could trust these people. This was going to be fair, a fair fight. I didn't know that he was a target or a victim of the counterintelligence program. But they really used perjured testimony. A key witness was asked, are you an informant? Have you ever been an informant for the FBI or any other agency? He said no. The prosecutor knew that he had been an informant. In fact, at that time, through the records we found out afterwards, he'd informed 33 times for the FBI. Now, of course, we know he's an informant for the LA County DA's office, the LA Police Department, and the FBI. Yet they continue to stonewall a man who's been in jail from '72 until now. And actually, he was in jail since 1970. So 26 years for a crime he didn't commit. And I've said that that one case will not let me retire from practicing until he's free.
I don't understand, whatever the city is, how good cops allow bad cops to do this. Do they sit by? Do they know? Is the system so built so that if, in fact, you try to stop it, you're consumed by that?
It's a very tough, it's a real tough issue. Just recently here in New York, you've had a situation where a police officer was involved with the death of a young man, where the judge acquitted the police officer and it caused some furor. One of the people who testified against that police officer has had to be transferred because of harassment and fear for her safety. There is really this kind of thin blue line, really a siege mentality, where it's us against them. Now, police work is very tough, Charlie.
Then you put your life on the line.
Every day.
And too many mayors have been to too many funerals of too many good cops.
Absolutely. So they tend to stick together. That's how a Mark Furman could exist for 20 years. People knew about him. Nobody calls him on it. That's how he flourishes. And so he gets to retirement day in this kind of situation. And he's not all the police. Now, make no mistake about it, there are a number of good police, but they tend to look the other way. The good guy, bad guy. The good guy doesn't say anything about it. Bad guy goes on and does what he has to do.
Back to your career. You're driving down the highway with your family. You're in your brown Rolls Royce. You are known, prosecutor,
Yes.
successful, admired. You're pulled over. What happened?
I'm the assistant district attorney for Los Angeles County. It's 1978, 1979. I'm doing what I love doing. I've gone back from private practice now. I hear the officers give commands to get out of the car and put your hands over your head. I get out of the car and I look back and it's amazing. There are police cars in the...
Not one, but three.
Oh, there's 3 police cars. There's officers behind doors barricaded. Their guns are out and they're pointed toward me. Now, I know from my experience, you never do your fighting or arguing in the street. I then step over to the curb. I'm concerned because my children, my 2 youngest children in the car, they start to cry when they see this happening to their dad. Officer walks with his gun in hand, and I say to him, put that gun away. My children are in that car. So the children see this gun. He comes inside. I carry a bag. The officer goes inside the bag, opens my bag.
Is your wallet and stuff?
Yeah, he has no probable cause of this, but he goes inside this bag, and he sees my badge. And then he's waving off and everything, because it has a badge in there saying Assistant DA number 3. I said, no, get your sergeant out here. We got to talk about why this happened. They gave me an excuse that, gee, you know, we thought this car might be stolen in this area. And I said, wait a minute, see those license plates there? JCJR? They've been with this car for as long as I've had it. They were with the car before. I said, you know, you stopped me because I was an African American. That's not right. You had no reason. Well, you know, no, that's not it, that's not it, that's not it. No, they didn't admit it, but that was clearly the reason. We were going 30 miles an hour. It was a Saturday afternoon, a bright, sunny day on Sunset Boulevard. I'll never forget that, because I then was faced with the situation, Charlie, trying to explain to my daughter, Tiffany, who's now a newscaster.
Florence, South Carolina still?
South Carolina, yes, absolutely. Why her daddy was stopped. She said to me, Daddy, aren't you on the same side as the police? I said, yes, honey, I am. And I remember how we were insulated by our folks. I did the best I could to understand that there were good police officers, make her understand. There were good police officers and bad police officers. And sometimes people did things. It was difficult, though.
As a prosecutor, did you ever put a policeman on the stand who you knew might not be retelling the story exactly the way it happened in order to get a conviction?
Oh, I think so. I think that was one of the things. And you look at
didn't that bother you? I mean, there's a defendant there you're convicting, perhaps.
Troubled me no end. In fact, the reports are written so well. They always said the same thing. You know, when there's just drunk driving arrest.
There you were part of the same system, and you were putting guys on you know is close to perjury.
Exactly.
So you...
Exactly. So you know what I did?
What?
I went to my superiors and I said, we talk about this in the book, in a chapter called A Soul Divided. Right. I said, I'm not going to prosecute these cases anymore, especially 148s, where I believe the police officers are fabricating these stories. So I become part of the conspiracy to keep these people from suing the city of Los Angeles. And that's what I say to prosecutors. I mean, the job doesn't mean anything if you don't try to stand for something. So I stopped doing that, and they respected that.
What do you think will change it?
Oh, I think you got to have good people in the system, people who, it's not just a job. You got to have police officers who live and work in the community.
Do you believe that the LA Police Department that stopped you in your Rolls Royce that day in front of your children are any different than the police department in Los Angeles today?
Oh, I think it's a little better today. I think since we have Chief Willie Williams, I have my differences with some of the things
Chief Willie Williams was there when O.J. Simpson.
Yes, and I have my differences about some of the things he's done, but I think that the attitude is probably a little bit better now than it was at that time. In those days, we had Chief Gates, the reincarnation of Parker in some regards. And although Darrell Gates is a very engaging and charming fellow, he had many of those same policies, and he made so many unfortunate public pronouncements.
Other than religion and family and race, nothing has influenced you more than the battle against what you characterize as police misconduct.
Yes.
Nothing.
Yes, that's been a real battle all of my life. Because you know why, Charlie? I realized early on that first traffic ticket that I tried, the police officer in the street is the single most powerful figure in the criminal justice system. He could take your life, he can abuse you, he can maim you, and they're going to take his word.
There's one problem with this, though, because when you say it, not you, but when anybody says it, and it is so central, is the fact of so many good, hard-working policemen and women who get up every morning in a job that they don't make that much money and risk their life for our safety, you know, and they're tarred
Really is it?
with this sense of, you guys are on the take, you guys are corrupt, you guys beat up on minorities.
It's a real problem. One thing about the LAPD, we don't
It's unfair
really...
to them.
It is unfair to the good officers, and most of them are good officers. Here's the problem with it. First of all, in LA, we don't have many officers on the take. We don't have much corruption there. What we do have, however, is more brutality than we should. There's a hardcore group of officers, and they now know. They were identified in the Christopher Commission report and the Webster report. These hardcore officers who keep having complaints, who keep beating up people. The problem with the good officers, and certainly there are many more of them, is they shouldn't stand idly by. These are paramilitary organizations. If the head of the department says...
Paramilitary organization?
Yes, I mean, they follow orders. I mean, the LAPD,
oh, you mean in terms of the whole police department?
The structure, right. Police officers follow orders. If the chief says, we're not going to tolerate an officer abusing someone, and if you are there and you see this, or you countenance this, you're going to be in trouble also. And the internal affairs really meant what it's supposed to be internal affairs, where they had some teeth in it, where they weren't worried about things like conduct on becoming an officer, where you go out and you accidentally pick up somebody who's a drag queen or something, you get fired for that. But go out and beat somebody up or shoot somebody, whatever, it's real, it's a different story. So we need the good officers to stand up and to speak out. That's what clears the house. And you cannot then, they shouldn't be subjected to harassment from Serpico to this lady here in New York who blew the whistle on this particular officer. You've got to have officers who stand up.
When you got the call, when you heard that O.J. Simpson had been a murder and O.J. Simpson was being questioned, did you first think what? What did you think?
I just, my heart went out. I knew O.J. Simpson.
Friend?
Yeah, friend. Not
friend.
Acquaintance friend. Somebody I didn't see very often, but I'd seen before. Right. 2 years before, I'd seen him at a, his daughter had graduated, and I was back at the graduation, went to a party, had a party along with him. I talk about this in the book. Somebody that I had respect for, growing up around Los Angeles. I felt my heart went out. His ex-wife, thought about those children, but I didn't think much else about it except because...
Was your first instinct O.J. Simpson could not kill someone?
Oh, that was my sense. That was always my sense. I didn't think of him as a suspect at all. I felt so terrible for the children and, you know, for him and the loss. That was my initial thoughts, right?
But did you know anything about all these other incidents involving him that had come to light during the trial and leading up to the trial and during the trial?
No, I didn't.
It was not part of your knowledge?
No,
not
it wasn't part of my knowledge. No, it wasn't any common knowledge. There may have been an article regarding the January 1st, 1989 incident, but I don't recall that at the time, no.
Jeffrey Toobin, as you know, in his book. Have you read these books, these other books?
I was busy writing my own.
I know
no, I did not, but it's been, I know much of what's said because I'm asked questions all the time.
And the question that everybody asks out of the Toobin book is one, I mean, each of these books have a sort of flashpoint in which the question, the question about you is, did you say to anybody at any time, before you took the case, he's guilty?
Absolutely not.
Not once, not anybody. Anybody who stepped forward to say, Cochran said that is a lie.
That's exactly correct, and you won't find anybody who will step forward.
Why would Toobin write it?
You know, it's amazing why Jeffrey does things like this. I know Jeffrey Toobin from court. Let me answer this.
He's a distinguished reporter.
He is a distinguished reporter, but he never heard me say it. I've talked to him many occasions. He says he has a source who somebody told him. Let me tell you why it's a lie. Jeffrey Toobin says that on June 17th, I told somebody that O.J. Simpson's in denial, should go along, and then maybe he should plead to a lesser charge or diminished capacity. On June 17th, I was working as a commentator, and I was going around, I was speaking, that evening I was engaged to go on Nightline.
Right.
I didn't know anything really about the case. I didn't have any reports. O.J. Simpson had never even called me. He says also in the book that I had inside information. I didn't know anything. I first saw police reports in this case after I entered into July 22nd of 1994. I
hadn't seen anything. Didn't know anything.
Didn't know anything. O.J. Simpson had called me from the jail, and to keep the press from making a big hubbub, I never went down to the jail. We talked over the phone.
You and Simpson?
Me and Simpson. And then I talked also with Shapiro. Never went to the jail because I knew if I went down there, it would cause all these rumors. Never saw any reports until after I appeared in court on Friday, July 22nd.
So you had, while you were sitting around the Nightline studio waiting to go on Nightline, you didn't say to anybody anything that could have been misinterpreted as he's guilty and he ought to do this or he ought to do that?
Absolutely not.
No advice for whoever the attorney might be.
Yeah, I didn't know what the facts were. I didn't know.
Yeah.
No, I didn't do that. I was there just to answer questions and to respond to the fact. In fact, that evening, I was concerned that I thought he was going to kill himself that evening until it was resolved.
Why would he kill
late.
himself?
Because that's suicide note. There was a suicide note that they'd read early in the day, Kardashian and I think Shapiro, indicating that he said he was innocent, but he just couldn't understand why all this was happening to him. And it seemed as though this so-called low-speed chase just seemed like a horrible thing. So again, I was thinking that something bad might happen to this.
But this is a guy of amazing strength, isn't it? I mean, you do what he did with his life to become the football star he did, to succumb to suicide.
It would be hard to understand, but he'd never been through this before. Here's a man whose life had really been charmed.
And, he had a lot to lose.
And he did. And it seemed he was having a tough time. But that note was just based upon the note. I had no inside information.
How do you explain Kardashian?
Well, you know, I haven't seen the book yet. I saw only a tease on a program coming up later.
You know what he said?
It's something about having doubts or whatever.
Right.
I'm surprised. We always thought of him as a very, very, very strong friend for O.J. Simpson. That's all.
He was there every day.
And he renewed his bar license and became a lawyer. Renewed his license. I'm really surprised. He never talked about having any doubts before this. And what I'm really surprised about, because by and large, he's a fellow that I have a great respect for, is the ethical violation. He is a lawyer. He cannot.
So he's violating the confidentiality of a relationship with a client to be saying that, even now, after an acquittal, it's a violation? To say I had doubts about it?
Oh, absolutely, because the client has the client didn't release him from doing this. And he now puts himself in a position where the client is about to have a civil trial. Is Kardashian now going to be called as a witness or whatever? This is.
I had doubts about it. I mean, he may even say more than that. I don't know.
Yeah, we haven't seen the book, but I mean, that's the thing that's so hard to understand. So
if he is saying that he could be held in contempt.
Could be held now. The state bar could do more than that. If he is
barring?
violating the attorney-client privilege, that's how serious it is for a lawyer to do that.
I'm not as familiar with this case as most reporters who cover it because it was not my beat. It's not what I do, as you well know.
I understand, sure.
What was in that bag? And whatever happened to that bag?
Which bag are you talking about?
One that supposedly Kardashian had.
Well, the bag that Kardashian had, and it'd be interesting for him to talk about this in the book. But the bag, we brought that bag to court. The bag I think that they're talking about remained in Kardashian's garage. The police never came back. We then arranged to have that bag picked up and brought to court. And they inspected that bag and went to, I'm sure, every possible lab. There's nothing in that bag. That's the bag that he had. Yeah. So he had himself a lot of speculation toward him based upon the bag, but the bag had nothing in it but clothes.
Talk about some of the personalities in this case that you've been through this routine before, too.
Sure.
Shapiro.
Bob Shapiro did a good job in putting together the team. Something happened to him along the way.
Did passing the baton to you bother him?
Yes, that was the triggering mechanism because it wasn't a voluntary passing. It was January 2nd of 1995. O.J. Simpson said, I'm making a change. I want somebody else to head this team up. I need a trial lawyer. That, at the time, I didn't know. That was difficult for Bob. He offered to leave the team. Simpson was smart. Simpson says, look, I don't want him off this team. He'll cause me more problems outside. So he stayed. And he was a team player. I mean, at that point, he stayed there. We didn't know how deeply the feelings went. And, you know, early
deeply
on,
the feelings went that Simpson was guilty.
No, I mean, by deeply the feelings went about this change. I mean, at that point.
I see. How much
there was resentment, much more resentment than I realized at the time.
You think he believed Simpson? You suggest he believed Simpson was guilty.
You know, early on, he never talked about that. Later on, we'd have these theories. He'd come up with this theory about that. Well, I got it. He went over there to key her car. And I
slash her tires.
I said, wait a minute, she wasn't killed with a key. What are you talking about? Well, key her car, slash her tires. And so we'd hear these things, and I'd say, look, that's silly. The client has always maintained his innocence. So we'd have those kind of things. We started one meeting once when he was still in charge about how many here feel that O.J. Simpson is guilty? That's a heck of a way for it.
All of you sitting around a table, the dream team.
Yes, supposedly, yes. And
somebody, he says that or you say that?
No, he says that to start the meeting.
Right.
We're aghast, you know. And all of us feel very strongly that the client is innocent. I mean, you can see a Barry Scheck, a Peter Neufeld, sitting around the table, but we couldn't believe it. So those kind of things happen. Then there were other things you talk about him. He's, as I said, he put together some great witnesses, and then Henry Lee, Michael Batten, people like that. The fact that Barry Scheck and Neufeld are on the team, we owe that to him. But the day he cross-examined Van Adder, he comes to court wearing one of these LAPD kind of blue ribbons.
Yeah.
Van Adder is angry at him. Simpson is angry at him. We don't understand what he's doing. He makes friends, goes out of his way to make friends with Turtellow, who was then the lawyer of Furman. And I'd say to him, I said, Bob, when this is over, you're going to be the one sued. And sure enough, he was sued for $50 million by them. None of us were, because we never said to Jeffrey Toobin in the New Yorker magazine about Furman planning the
About race.
Yeah. So he goes on.
About planning police misconduct, and about Furman, right?
And some of the many other things, but probably the worst.
Well, just the point is that Furman, that it was Shapiro that gave Tubin the first idea to go look up.
Absolutely. And before I ever got on the case, Shapiro had this interview with Tubin and gave him the idea, and he was very proud of that. That this theory that this racist.
He thought he was spinning the story.
Yeah, thought he was spinning the story. He was very proud of his ability to spin stories. And perhaps the thing that I found most offensive was the fact that one day in the lockup, he was surreptitiously taping our conversations. And I understand others may have done that. Can you imagine that?
In order to write a book.
To write a book. And then they're trying to represent the client. People are working on their book, taping conversations doing that. It's pretty frightening. You know, I don't know where the idea of advocacy comes in and where these lawyers got so lost along the way. And I really found that offensive.
Chris Darden, come back to Shapiro in a minute. Chris Darden was here, talked about what happened to the relation between the two of you. Said, among other things, you ran that courtroom. That Cochran had everybody under his spell. And you were, including the judge.
That's preposterous. We heard some of those comments. We went back and looked at the rulings. Judge Ito ruled for the prosecution more than 70% of the time. I have a lot of respect for Judge Ito, but keep in mind, this is the judge who allowed a dream in. What kind of a dream was it? Even he admitted that was wrong. He took 60-some plus incidents regarding Furman and gave us 2. One of you couldn't hear.
But what about the civil judge who I think, and again, I plead not following this as closely because I do other things other than cover this trial, other than even pay attention to this trial. Has the civil judge said to attorneys, we will not allow evidence of police misconduct unless you have the evidence to back it up? You can't.
Yes, there's an indication.
And that's a very dramatic difference. So the central point you hung your defense on, this civil suit will not hear that kind of testimony.
Well, not exactly. First of all, the lawyer, Bob Baker, is an excellent lawyer. What he said, you got to have some
Simpson's
proof.
lawyer?
Yeah, Bob Baker. He says an excellent civil lawyer. Watch him, remember that name. He is the best lawyer in that courtroom now. He and Bob Blazer. And you're going to see and hear more about him. What he said is essentially you've got to produce some hard evidence of a police conspiracy or whatever. Right. Now, you and I have been talking already. It's very hard. Other police officers aren't going to come forward. Police officers didn't come forward on Furman. We found that tape through the screenwriter. It's very difficult. So the judge cannot stop, however, the fact that you bring up circumstantial evidence of certain things that happened, I think. And so this judge has taken a tougher view. One of the real problems of it.
It would have made your case much more difficult if you had this kind of ruling in your criminal case.
Well, perhaps so, but look, we wanted to go into...
Come on,
no, let me tell you what Judge Ito curtailed us from talking about it being a possible drug killing. They said, you can't bring that up. I mean, we were curtailed
isn't that
from
the right
beginning.
ruling in a case,
Absolutely.
in a sense?
I think
but can a criminal defense attorney bring up any possible scenario
but
unless you have direct evidence that it's
you need witnesses.
feasible?
You need witnesses, and we thought we had witnesses, and they would not allow us to call them. And I think you're going to find, so the bottom line is this, by the time this case goes to trial, in the civil case, I think you're going to find that the defense will have, they can produce enough witnesses to indicate and be able to argue that this evidence was tampered with. There are certain items that you cannot otherwise explain. There's going to be, no matter what this judge rules,
it's mainly the blood evidence if you're going to make your case.
Right, cc's of missing blood.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to explain.
But here's what a lot of people ask, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm being tough on this thing because I don't really know that much about it. A lot of people saying it's one thing that there's missing blood, it's another thing to show what happened to it and it was tampered.
Oh, absolutely. But
they're two very different propositions.
That's true, but look, Charlie, if you find EDTA, this substance, this preservative substance on the back gate or on the sock supposedly in the bedroom, how'd that get there? I mean, you got to have an explanation for that. Why is the blood on the socks in the bedroom? First of all, the socks aren't there at 4:13 per video from Willie Ford, but they're there 20 minutes later. How does EDTA get on those socks? Why is the blood there put there by compression? Why does the blood go from side 1 to side 2 to side 3 if there's a leg in it? There are things in this case that any rational person, if you understand the facts, will never be able to explain.
But as a former prosecutor, aren't there always things you can't explain in a criminal case because of what different people see and what happens to evidence? Always.
Not this overwhelming. If the socks are key, and Marcia Clark says they're key to showing the blood trail, why aren't the socks there when there's a video at the foot of the bed taken at 4:13 and they're there at 4:40? There's some things you just can't explain. Where is this missing blood? You can't explain. Why do the photographs of the back fence taken around June 12th or 13th. They don't show any marks back there.
But the fact that Vanetta kept that vial of blood.
Yes, and he also took two others, too.
But does not prove that he tampered with it, does it?
Doesn't prove
the fact that he kept it and didn't immediately go do something with it does not prove that he had criminal intent.
But it gives him the opportunity. You see, you start.
So all you got to do is show opportunity to create doubt.
And then you then,
right?
Yes, exactly.
And that's
more
what
than
it's
that.
about.
No, more than that.
Create doubt, and you're on your way.
Well, but more than that, you have to have the opportunity. First of all, if Vanetta hadn't taken the blood, then you might be hard pressed to do it. But you have the blood that has EDTA in it, and then of course now you find.
That's two things.
Okay, that's two. You have the blood. It has EDTA in that blood, and now you find EDTA on several of the items. Well. You know, does it take a rocket scientist to figure that is certainly a reasonable hypothesis for what happened? And you couple that with
what it takes? It takes a jury that, because of their life experience, might find that reasonable.
That's right. We're talking about what is reasonable.
That's
and
what
you hit
it
upon
takes.
it better than almost anyone else. It is about the history of this department. If you live in Los Angeles, you understand. This may not be how it is in Des Moines, Iowa. Maybe they didn't have Chief Parker there. If you grew up in L.A., and there's an oral tradition that's passed down many times through women in the community. The prosecutors didn't understand this. You don't have to tell anybody about that.
Did any part of Johnnie Cochran say, because of all this history that I outlined in the first 15 minutes of this conversation, say, I want to win this case because of O.J. Simpson, I believe is innocent, but also I want to put it to the L.A. Police Department in a case where they believe and think they've got their man, and I want to put him, take their measure in the most highly publicized suit in the history of American jurisprudence?
No.
Not anything to say, I'm going to show you, get you, prove to you that this no longer will happen in Los Angeles because I'm going to show what.
No, I believed he was innocent, the first part. I believed he was innocent. I believe that. But let me tell you why that wasn't so. If that were so, because if you think about it logically, I was the one who should have cross-examined Furman. Bob Shapiro asked me to do it.
But you didn't want to do that because...
But I didn't want to do it because it escalated the racial tension, and I opted in.
Well, either that or you didn't have the stomach for it.
I've had a whole career, 33
I know,
years.
but this guy, you so... What?
No, I'm the one who went to North Carolina. I'm the one who got the tapes. I have the stomach for it. That's what I have done.
But you didn't do it, why?
I didn't do it because I didn't want to escalate the racial tensions. I thought that if you saw this black lawyer out there asking this white police officer these questions, everybody expected that. It would certainly play into the racial fears. And I live in Los Angeles. Twice in my career as a lawyer, I've seen my city go up in smoke. And I didn't want to do it, and I picked
If I was Johnnie Cochran, if I was that good, I would have had a hard time when I came to the part that was later used, in a sense, to indict Johnnie Cochran about comparing the LAPD and Hitler because of what you knew. Not the question of what was in your heart, but the fact that, as smart as you are, the potential for the feelings it would create. Because the Holocaust, to all of society, and especially Jews in the world, there's never been anything, or will ever be anything, so evil.
You know, I'm not going to get into comparing tragedies. I'm not going to talk about slavery.
But that was the way it was perceived.
Right, and understand that. Let me tell you, of all the things that happened during my closing argument, I would not use that phrase or that analogy. But let me tell you a little bit about that.
You would not use it on second try?
I would not. I would not use it because I think it was misunderstood. That came from a Jewish lawyer who lost much of his family in Auschwitz, Chuck Linder. He writes also for the LA Times. That was an analogy that he proposed. The reason was we knew that Furman was a Nazi memorabilia collecting person, and very possibly a person who had Nazi ties. That's what everybody said who'd been in this room and knew this. The prosecutors also knew that. It seemed like an apt description. All I was trying to say, and I said Furman didn't have the power of a Hitler who was a scourge. I didn't minimize the show of the Holocaust at all. What I was trying to say was that Sir Edmund Burke said it better. All that's required for evil to triumph is for good men to remain silent. That's what I was trying to say. Now, I might have said that better and easier.
That would have been a much better way to put it.
People were so emotional, so I would not do that again. But that's what I was trying to say. I have been to Israel. I have been to Yad Vashem. I understand about the Holocaust. I'm an African American. I know about deaths of Millions
in
and
the
millions
civil
of
rights
people
movement,
came over here.
Black
came over
Americans had
enslaved.
no better friends than Jewish Americans.
That's right, and I have no better friends than Jewish Americans now. And so I would not have done that, but I think it was misunderstood. I really do, Charlie.
Anything else you wouldn't have done in that trial?
Oh, I think
Any
that's
regrets?
I think that's primarily the major regret. I think the other things, you know, and as I said, I don't think that, I thought it was an appropriate analogy coming from a Jewish lawyer, but because of the misunderstanding, it just wasn't, I wouldn't do that again. The other things, I was an advocate. It wasn't about trying to take the popular course, Charlie. It was about trying to represent the client.
Did it make any difference to you whether Simpson did it or not?
Yes, it did, and it would. Because let me tell you why. I would never suborn perjury. I would not
I
put a witness
understand. You
up there.
can't do that.
You can't do that.
Yeah, suborn perjury. But so far, Simpson could say, well, I didn't do it. And you take his word for it.
Yeah, you try to take your clients at their word.
But you didn't put him on the trial, so you're not suborning perjury.
Right, but I mean, you would. But if you tried to introduce evidence of the timeline, if he said, "Look, I did this," you wouldn't then call any witnesses to try and show they didn't do it. You couldn't do that. You know, you wouldn't. But in this case, he didn't testify, as you're aware. But he always maintained he didn't do it. He never deviated from that with any of us.
I understand that, and everybody I've talked to, Barashek's been on the show for an hour as well, and he said the same thing. He said, I believed in the guy.
Yeah.
And then they say, well, why do you believe in him? And said, Ullman said, why do you believe in the guy? I said, well, just the way he was suggested to me that...
It's true.
How can you, ask you these questions suggested that you believe that Simpson lied to you and believe that he did it and all that. But how can you know that somebody didn't do it because of the way they look and the way they talk?
No, you can't. You can't know that. But what you do is you take what.
And because he take his word for it.
Yeah, you take their word for it. But also,
but I would argue that anybody would kill would lie.
Well, they may be true, but you also look at it from the standpoint of what this person tells you, and if it checks out, if he says to you certain things and they check out, you know.
Did you have to know for yourself then? Did you have to go check it out and know for yourself before you would say yes?
No, from the standpoint, I knew O.J. Simpson from the very beginning. He said he was innocent.
So because I knew O.J. Simpson, I said, I'll do it, I'll take your word for it, I'm not going to go check it out, whereas with most people, you would want to check it out.
Well, no, I wouldn't. You don't really have the luxury of going out you're not like the prosecutor, you don't go out and check everything out. Now, somewhere along the way, in the course of the case, you may change your mind and think this guy's not telling the truth.
Did you ever have a moment like that in which you said?
No, we didn't. I did not.
His memories fall to here in terms of what he said, because it's not for the public record. Well, it's not for the jury. And what you say, we got a contradiction here. How do we figure out how to do something about this contradiction?
He would always be able to explain things. And you know, one of the things that really helped us a lot was the interview we had with the police, those 33 minutes on tape, at the very beginning. And, you know, that said a lot, because he had what, 1 or 2 hours of sleep.
Right.
He came back, talked to these detectives. His lawyers said, you shouldn't do this. He said, look, I want to talk.
Howard Weitzman?
Yeah, Howard Weitzman and Skip Tapp. They left and left him alone with these officers. He was in the car riding with them downtown.
Now, why would they do that?
Because according to Howard Weitzman and the others, Van Adder and Lang said, if you insist on being here, we won't interview your client. Someone said, look, I have nothing to hide. I want to talk with him. Now,
I mean, promise me, if I'm ever I hire you and I'm brought before the police,
yes.
You know, and the police officer said, I'll listen to you, and I don't go talk to the police. I mean, that's stupid. It's stupid.
It's not the wisest thing.
I mean, that was stupid by Weitzman's point, too. Well, to allow your client and your friend, in this case, I guess.
Well, you know, I always felt that if your client insists on doing it, you either one or two things. You drag him out of there, or you say...
Or you drag yourself out of the case.
That's it.
One or the other.
I'm leaving the case. That's exactly correct.
Is that why Weitzman left, or did he leave the case for some other reason, as you know, the speculation in Los Angeles?
No, I mean, at that point, he's still on the case. No, right. I mean, leave right at that moment.
You're right.
Get another lawyer.
If you do this, you got another lawyer.
That's right.
Because correct. You're hurting yourself, and I'm not going to be part of you engaging in suicide
That's exactly correct.
There are 2 other books I want to talk to you about. One is Vincent Bugliosi. He says it was a winnable case for the prosecution, and they blew it.
I've not read his book. I know Vincent.
Nor have I, to be honest with you.
Vincent has not tried a case in over 20 years. From what it seems to me, it's like a press release for Vincent Bugliosi. I mean, how easy? He never even came to court. He says he didn't watch the case. For a guy to stand on the
what else he says, though, which I didn't know he says this, and I haven't read this book either. I haven't read any of these books, except this one. He says, this is a story of you, and this is more than a story of the trial.
This is not a Simpson.
And that's why I went through it the way I did, to say, who is Johnnie Cochran, before we figure out how does he come to be here before we examine what he did once he was there. Bugliosi seems to say that the LAPD, just to question him for 45 minutes, that was stupid. You know, I've talked to other people who in law enforcement say, if I'd had that opportunity, he would have been there a lot longer than 45 minutes, and maybe 6 hours would have been better.
You know what, though, Charlie? All of these things...
If you were a prosecutor and you'd had an opportunity to do that, you would have been thrilled by that opportunity.
Oh, absolutely.
Wouldn't you?
Certainly would be.
6 hours? I mean, to go at the guy and you can let him go for 45 minutes if, in fact, there's some reason to believe he might have done it.
He's in there without...
Exactly.
He's in there without a lawyer even. I mean, understand that.
How stupid is that?
Well, these two detectives had been there...
So maybe these guys are not...
27 years apiece, basically. And if they did so... But you'll see, here's what he does. And this is the sad part. He only toots his own horn. He's saying, it's easy when you're standing on the sideline to say, I could have done this, coulda, woulda, shoulda. You know, that's just make-believe in his own mind. He hadn't tried a case in 20 years. He's an author, and he needs to stay there and stop speculating about real lawyers who are actually trying cases, those of us who are out here. We would have been glad to have Vincent Bugliosi. Time has passed.
You could have taken Bugliosi on this case.
It would have been no contest. Marcia Clark is a tough lawyer. She's been trying cases. She's real. She's out there. Not what you thought about what he did 20 years ago. The Manson case, and I'm not taking anything away from that case, but I mean, most people could have won the Manson case. You have a defendant who has a swastika on his forehead, threatens to kill the jury. I mean, that wasn't exactly...
all kinds of blood evidence everywhere.
That was not a tough case to win. So, he should stop riding that horse and stay out of this. He's not one who really should be commenting. I mean, the other participants, I can understand them at least writing. He didn't watch the trial or whatever. He just comes to tell us he could win, and it was an outrage otherwise.
And you say you would have loved to have had it.
We would have loved to have had him try this case. We would have loved it, and to a person we would have, because emotionally, we would have loved to it. Now, I've seen Vincent. I've been on a program with him. I've seen his reaction to various things, and we would have loved it. And there's no question about that. So I don't put much stock. I mean, that's just what he's talking about is speculation. He wasn't even there. But what he tries to do is he turns it around, though, and criticizes everybody. And what he does in that process is builds himself up. He says, if I'd been there, unlike Darden, who he says was incompetent, and Clark, and the officers, he would have done everything right. Now, that's real easy to talk about.
Tubin says the prosecution was incompetent, too. Now, he was there. And he also was a lawyer.
Tubin was there, and he's a lawyer. And I was going to say something about Jeffrey Tubin. Jeffrey Tubin, though, he's an engaging young man, and he and I talked during the trial. But I'll tell you something interesting about him. He was very biased, and he'll admit it. He made a decision early on that he thought O.J. Simpson was guilty, and it colored everything he did. Quick example. One day, he was on the Today Show in the morning, and he came on the air and told the national television audience, today the prosecution is going to show that a photograph of the glove of Simpson taken as an announcer has a defect in it, and that defect will match the glove in court. And I saw him later that day and I said, Jeffrey, why do you do things like that? Did you just make that up? Well, somebody told me that. That's typical of the kind of things that he would do. Where I don't know if anybody told him that or not, but there was absolutely no truth in that. And he had an obligation to look out these things. I mean, he should have called me up and asked me, did you ever tell anybody that you thought Simpson was... He never did that, and we know each other. And he didn't do that. So if you're just looking for some source or somebody to tell you something, that's one thing. And, and he is a talented fellow, but he was just dead wrong on a number of issues. Simpson didn't know about the verdict the night before.
That's the other point he makes, that somebody in the jail and staff told him. Because they had a friend who had a friend, and one of the, I guess, alternative jurors, that's the story, one of the alternate jurors told somebody who told somebody. Yeah, and that wasn't true. That somebody asked for Simpson's autograph, which is preposterous. No. Yeah, because we know you're getting out of here tomorrow, so we want to get the autograph now. No. Not happening. Simpson did not know.
No, he did not know. When he stood up there,
but you also say Shapiro turned to Simpson and said, be ready for this, they're going to convict you.
Absolutely. When Judge Ito looked down toward in the center of the courtroom after he saw the verdict, he had this look on his face. Shapiro leaned over and said, it's going to be bad news, you're going to get convicted. I said, Bob, you knock it off.
Shut up.
I said, he had called Dershowitz the night before and said, get the appeal ready. That was the same night, however, he'd gone out and had this interview with Barbara Walters, too. So he had a different theory. His theory was he would come in, forget he had amnesia, and blame us for the race card, claim if he'd been in charge, it would have worked out fine, we lost the case. None of that worked for him.
Race card from the bottom of the deck.
Yeah, and you can imagine that he's the one who brought it up.
Okay, but before that, you sitting watching ABC with Barbara Walters and Shapiro that night.
I didn't see that either. I heard about it. I didn't see
heard about it. Yeah, and would you say, would you think, would you want to pick up the phone and call him, and did you?
No, I've never.
You didn't call him, you didn't bring it up with him? You never spoken to him since?
I've not spoken to him since, because I haven't seen him since October 3rd.
So what happens if he calls you up and says, Johnny, let's have lunch and figure out what separates us?
I would do that.
You would?
I would do that because of the fact that, we had a relationship in this case. And he's done some things that I would love to hear his explanation for. I think he could not explain them.
Like what?
The shifting sands, giving this interview. turning on his teammates. I mean, how could you do that? How could you? He spent the last 3 months or so working on his book, taping our conversation, going down and seeing O.J. Simpson. When I told O.J. Simpson about the tape recording, he said, "I'm not surprised." He said, because he came down to see me at the jail and took his tape recorder out and said, "Tell me your innermost thoughts." And, you know, Simpson basically told
not the way you get somebody to tell innermost thoughts anyway.
Yes, it isn't.
F. Lee Bailey.
A fine lawyer, and I have a lot of respect for him. He did an excellent job on Furman, especially. That was, I thought, the high point of his trial. And he never got the plaudits he deserved, but his cross-examination was so excellent that when we found those tapes, it fit right with
the 10 years. So he used 10 years. He didn't know about the tapes.
No, did not know. We did not know about those tapes at all.
A bad time for you is when you got 2 of your guys duking it out in public.
It was
in public.
Terrible. It was, some people say, if you talk to Barishek and Jerry Ullman, they said that perhaps the greatest achievement we had was keeping the team together where 2 members don't even talk. They didn't want to ride in the same car together. And they had been close where Lee Bailey was Shapiro's son's godfather.
Well, not only that, Shapiro had defended Bailey, hadn't he?
Sure, he defended him, and they were very close. They were on each other's letterhead. And so it was a tough. But we managed through that also because it's about the client, not our personal egos or our personal problems.
This is whenever you interview a criminal defense lawyer, and somebody watches the interview, they come to you and say, "I just want to know one thing."
Very good.
What is it? Tell me what you think it is.
Would you defend someone if you thought he was guilty?
That's what they always say.
Yeah, well, I know that. That's why I know that.
Yeah.
And it depends. If a client comes to me and says, "I'm guilty, will you defend me?" I said, "Well, do you want me to go down and work this case out, enter into some kind of a plea bargain? Then fine, I can do that." If the client says, "No, no, 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 I want you to give me a full-out all defense and cross-examine all the witnesses," I probably wouldn't take it, but certainly you would be ethically and morally okay if you did it, as long as the guy says you did it, and as long as you didn't try to bring in witnesses when you knew they would be lying. You could cross-examine the witnesses, clearly, but so it would be a tougher situation. The interesting part of that is hardly any client ever tells any lawyer that, unless he wants to plead guilty.
It's like they say in prison.
That's right. You know.
Everybody here, buddy, is innocent, has been framed.
Right.
Every one of them.
Yes.
Nobody, not few of them there who say, you know,
there are
boy,
some who
there are few. I belong to be here, and
right.
you know. What happens now? First of all, if something happens and somehow, for some reason, some piece of evidence turns up, or O.J. Simpson says, "I can't take it," you know. In fact, I have, notwithstanding Johnnie Cochran, notwithstanding Barry Scheck, and notwithstanding Peter Neufeld, and notwithstanding all those people who fought valiantly to save my life. Life.
Yes.
I lied to him.
We'd be terribly, I can speak for myself, and I know Barry would too, we'd be terribly disappointed. We did our jobs based upon everything that we knew at the time, all the evidence and whatever, based upon relying on our client. I don't think this would ever happen, but we'd be very disappointed if it did.
And you have no reason in your mind, nothing's ever caused you to say, you know?
Not at all.
Lawrence Schiller, you know him?
Yes, I know Larry Schiller.
He's got a book too.
Yes, apparently so. That's the Kardashian.
Yeah, that's right. That's the Kardashian. Well, I mean, there's some other things in there. He seems to believe. How do all these guys come to these conclusions? Tubin seems to believe. Nick Dunn seems to believe. How did all these people sit around and watch this trial in the courtroom? Is it because their experience was different from the jurors? Is that the reason so many reporters seem to cover this trial and believe this guy?
That
he's guilty.
Okay.
Tubin believes it. Nick Dunn believes it.
Well, let's take the first.
Schiller knows Simpson. I don't know what. I haven't read his book either. But
let me take the first two. Larry Schiller, I have not read his book.
I
So
haven't
it's a little
either.
hard.
I don't.
But the first two. Dominic Dunn said at the very beginning. See, that I have more respect for Dominic Dunn than some others, because he said he lost a child.
He did.
He says,
right.
"Look, I can't be fair, and I think this guy's guilty." And up front, he said that. So all of everything he did was colored by that. But he at least had enough integrity to say that. Tubin is a lawyer and should have known better. So I don't forgive him as easily for doing that. Larry Schiller, I don't know. Larry Schiller wrote the first book, that bestseller, I Want to Tell You, with O.J. Simpson, and had his confidence and made money off O.J. Simpson. Now, I don't know until somebody tells me otherwise that he says O.J. Simpson.
I don't know what he says either, but I'd certainly like to.
I'd be really surprised if that happened.
Yeah, but he's got Kardashian and, you know.
Yeah, with this tease that
yeah.
we've seen.
All right, let me ask you, how has this changed your life?
Oh, it's because I have a lot less privacy when you come into a building like
Did
this.
you write a book for $4.5 million for this thing?
Well, I can't talk about the amounts, but Charlie, very good, Charlie. It was excellent.
Wait a minute, but you got more than anybody else. You take some pride in that, don't you?
Well,
you got more than Martha. You got more than Chris Darden.
I take pride in that book, and I really do now. And it's not just a Simpson book. So fortunately,
well, I pointed that out 3 times.
You've been really good about that. But yeah, I take some pride in the fact that we have this book that I got a chance to write it, and I hope that it talks about the justice system.
I want to come to that in just a moment in terms of legacy of all this.
Sure.
Are you happy about Chris Darden's success?
I am happy for his success. And you know, I wish him well. I said in the book, I wish him well, but I also wish him some wisdom. This idea of attacking the jury, going around crying, acting like a whining and crying, that's not professional, and you ought to stop it. One of the best things I did for Chris Darden, I took him aside as a person that I cared about, and I said, don't you take Furman. He was going to take him as a witness. It's the best advice he got during that trial.
Now, why should Chris Darden trust you?
He didn't take him.
When you're the lead defense attorney.
Because I looked him in the eye and I told him, I said, don't you take this guy. This guy's a bad guy.
What did he say to you about Marcia Clark?
Oh, he said all kinds of, he said, you know, he'd be flirting around. He'd say things like, leave my woman alone. And he'd get all upset about it, you know, as though that was his woman. I said, what are you talking about, your woman? What do you mean by that? I presume he was jesting about it. But, you know, you never know.
You never know, do you?
You never know. You never know.
A lot of people think that this showed the ugly, ugly, ugly face of racism in the reaction to this trial. African Americans split from Caucasian Americans on this. And it says race remains the American dilemma.
It does. I think race is the American dilemma. And I think the problem with it is the cure proposed is one of denial by so many Americans. Denial will not cure it. We've got to...
Denial that a jury had an opportunity. Denial
about the issue of race. People don't want to talk about race in this country. It's a hard subject. It's a taboo. Don't ask, don't tell. That's why we don't solve it. You don't put it on the table. We need to get it out front and talk about the things that separate us. There are far more things, Charlie, that unite us than those that separate us. I agree. That's what I believe. I feel
have you talked to the president about this? On the phone, President Clinton? No,
I have not, and I would love to, because I think we need moral leadership at the highest level in this regard. It's the only thing that's going to happen. Let me tell you, W.B. Du Bois said at the beginning, in 1903...
This is what you quote in the last page.
Well, yes, among things, yes. When I talk about the two-ness aspect,
right,
that the problem of the 20th century would be the problem of the color line.
Right.
He was absolutely right. The only problem is going to be the problem of the 21st century, unless somebody steps up and says, wait a minute, the road traveled by blacks and whites together has brought us closer in a union, and somebody has to bring us together. Yeah. This is our country, and we love it, all of us.
But knowing that, it must bother you a little bit that when they think of Johnnie Cochran's defense of O.J. Simpson, they say he played the race card. He used race.
Yes, it bothers me because that's wrong, as I hope we've demonstrated tonight. Not only is it wrong, I never brought it up. I dealt with the witnesses, and I dealt with credibility in the history of the LAPD. I didn't use race any more than I used in the other case. If I had not gone after this particular witness, Furman, it would have been malpractice. It's just that simple. Ask any lawyer.
What do you think about what Furman is saying now? You know what he's saying? He's saying, I'm sorry.
That would be fine if he didn't turn right around and then try to blame the jury, saying that they made him a scapegoat. He's no scapegoat. He's...
No, he said... No, that's not what he said. What he said is he made it easy for them.
To scapegoat him or whatever.
No, he said the fact that I was there as a liar made it easier for them to convict Simpson.
To acquit Simpson.
Right. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I think with the apology we could accept. But he's in massive denial as to who he is and what this jury did. The jury didn't like him from the beginning, and he had nothing to do with it. Nobody was interested in him being a scapegoat. He should just come in there and told the truth. That's what we're talking about. And what kind of message does it send? A police officer gets on the stand and lies in a first-degree murder case, and he gets a $200 fine, gets to go home to Idaho.
What would have been appropriate from Johnnie Cochran?
Some time in custody. Absolutely. What any other person would have gotten under the circumstances. What kind of message do you send to police officers? It's okay to lie and get a $200 fine?
Well, give me a nice sentence that you think would be appropriate.
Well, the sentence carries up to 3 years. I'd leave that to the judge, but I think he should have gone to prison.
Should have gone to prison for perjury.
For perjury in a murder case like this? Absolutely. He said himself, I'm the key witness in the trial of the century. If I go down, the glove goes out, the case goes bye-bye, and he should have gone bye-bye for lying.
Well, what about you accused police officers of lying too? Should they go to prison?
Well, he was a police officer.
No, others. You accused Van Atta of lying.
Well, if they, no, I think in that situation, Van Atta's situation, we were talking about, Ito found he had a reckless disregard for the truth. We were using it there. And I think in a situation like that, I don't think he told us the truth.
Aren't you accusing him of lying when you say something happened to the vial and that they did something with it? I mean, he's the one that had custody of it. If you're saying that something was done to it, you're saying he did it, aren't you?
What I really said about Van Atta was the fact that I couldn't explain why he had this blood, and I thought that certainly opened us up to all kinds of possibilities. But I also said the Fiato brothers impeached him because he told them that he went over there because the husband's always the suspect. Now, is that impeachment or not? You know, there's a difference between impeachment and saying I've never used this N-word in 10 years. That's the difference.
Johnnie L. Cochran, proud son of Johnnie L. Cochran Sr., who tonight at the Plaza Hotel at a book party will be there with his son, author, defense attorney, American. Journey to Justice is his book. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Charlie. My pleasure.
Pleasure.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you for joining us. See you tomorrow night.